Welcome to Manage This, the podcast by project managers for project managers. Every couple of weeks, we get a chance to meet with you and have a conversation about what matters to you as a professional project manager. We'll cover topics such as project management certification, doing the job of project management, and we'll pick the brains of some of the leaders in the industry and also hear your stories. I'm your host, Nick Walker, and beside me are our resident experts, Andy Crowe and Bill Yates. They're the guys who've been there, done that, and not only live to tell about it, but are anxious to pass on their knowledge to you. All right, here we are again, guys.
How are you, Nick?
Great, doing well. I know you're a little under the weather.
I am. I picked up a little bit of a winter cold here, and so no fun. Right before a big milestone birthday and going out west for a ski trip, so not as much fun. Looking forward to that.
What birthday is that, Mr. Crowe?
It's a big milestone.
Does it have a zero in it?
It does have a zero in it, and we'll leave our listeners to do the detective work there.
Hey, no matter how much I mock you, this is Bill. No matter how much I mock you, you're still younger than me at all
that's
times.
True. That's true.
So there we go.
Yeah, a little bit younger.
And I think both of you are younger than me by a good bit. So we'll just pause it right there. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit because I'm going to have to admit my ignorance here today. All right. I have to admit that when you talk as if you've invented your own language sometimes. I hear you talking about Scrum, burn-up charts, Kanban boards, iterations, grooming, product backlogs. This is Agile talk, I understand. It seems that Agile, though, has its own vocabulary. Okay, it may be Greek to me, but may I assume that these are terms that a traditional project manager might understand?
I think, Nick, that you could manage projects your whole career and not know these terms, not encounter a lot of these terms. And some of it depends on where you manage the organizational culture, but Agile does have its own vocabulary, and it is its own set of practices. They're really a lot different than traditional project management.
That's true. And what we're seeing more and more are organizations that are bleeding waterfall and Agile. They'll have teams that are using a waterfall approach, a methodology to managing those projects, and then other teams that are using Agile approaches. Sometimes there's a bit of conflict between the teams. Maybe team members want to be on one methodology and not the other. So I think more and more people are, even if they come from a pure waterfall or traditional project management side, they're going to hear more of these terms and probably be pulled in and find value in some of these approaches.
And you know, Bill, we might as well explain. Somebody out there may not even know. They may be doing waterfall project management and not even know why it's called waterfall project management.
And thank you for voicing my very question. Okay, so just a quick explanation of waterfall.
Sure. So waterfall, also called SDLC, waterfall is called that because the activities literally cascade. You plan, that cascades into execution. That falls down into monitoring and control, and then sometimes it'll loop back up and you'll go through that several iterations in that. But Agile, one of the terms you threw out at the beginning was Scrum, and that term is taken from rugby. So a Scrum is where a bunch of people get together and basically make something happen, and that's much more indicative of what Agile is. Agile doesn't do a lot of upfront planning. They get together, they have a Scrum, they do some. They have something called an iteration or a sprint. And then next thing you know, they've got some releasable product at the end of that period of time. And so it's very different. Whereas in waterfall, you do all this planning up front. You come up with a master plan typically. You break it down. You really decompose the work. You know, the last time we talked about work breakdown structures, very traditional, very waterfall. Agile, Scrum, things like that are not that way.
And one of the fun things for us is seeing when those two camps start to, when the waters come together, there's a bit of a boiling point there. There's a bit of, hey, well, it should be this way. And the Agile camp saying, no, it should be this way. And one of the things that, one of the misnomers I think people have to overcome pretty quickly from the waterfall camp is that, well, if you're an Agile practitioner, you don't do any planning. You don't do any planning at all. And Andy, you mentioned the iterations. At the beginning of that iteration, there's going to be a planning time built
Yeah,
into
iteration
it.
zero a lot of times is to come up with sort of a high-level master plan, ground rules, things like that.
Right.
So we're talking not just a difference in words, word substitution. We're talking about actual different processes, different ways of thinking.
Yeah. So Nick, this is Andy, and when I started programming years ago, started my career as a software developer, and somebody took me aside one time, and I was learning machine language, and which is a fairly demanding practice as a programmer. But one of the guys took me aside and said, once you learn this and learn it well, everything from this point on is just going to be different vocabulary. All the practices are the same. You really understand how it works. That was true for a long time. And then some guys invented object-oriented programming, and I started learning a language called C++. And if you really get C++, it is its own religion. It's its own, I know the term's overused, but it's a paradigm shift. And you have to really think about things differently. That's the way Agile is. Agile isn't just substituting, okay, we call it a WBS over here, and we're going to call it a breakdown chart over here. It's not just substituting words. It really is a different practice. And so, sort of, you can think of it as waterfall is more top-down. It's driven from the top down, from senior management, through the sponsor, through the project manager, to the team. And Agile is more bottom-up, where the customer gets embedded in the team and they make decisions and the team is empowered, and there's not somebody, we joke about the smartest guy in the room. The smartest guy in the room is not over here telling us how to do things and what to do next.
So we're not just talking about translating from English to Spanish. We're talking about translating from English to Klingon.
Exactamente.
Yeah, Nick, this is Bill. One of the things that jumps out to me as a key differentiator is I think about someone who's been in the role of project manager for a number of years and is following a traditional waterfall approach. And now they learn about Agile and they start to embrace and practice Agile. That's tough. That's a big transformation. Now, fortunately for most people, they go, this is awesome. This is truly transformational. I love this. I see value in this. But, to Andy's point, if you have a top-down mentality in terms of managing a team, and you're going to drive out the planning and then assign out the tasks and the workflow, the resources, now I'm suddenly part of the team. It's probably a smaller team than I'm accustomed to. And we're self-organized. I mean, Andy, what do you do with that? I'm self-organized as an Agile practitioner.
Right. So it's self-organized, which means that there's not one person driving how the team is going to interact. The team sets their own ground rules, and then they're also empowered. And that's as big a deal to me, Bill, than just self-organized. Right. Now the team's empowered. They live and die by their decisions. So a lot of times you have the customer as part of that team, but the team moves as a unit. And if you and I are on an Agile team together, we're accountable for each other's work. We're collectively accountable. Yeah. It's crazy.
It is. It is.
So is there a point where we can say, okay, this is better? One is better than the other? Or are they equally as proficient? Or do you have a preference? What's best?
Yeah, and so let's talk about religion too, Nick, and talk about which religion is best. Are
you a Democrat or a Republican?
Right. Which one of those is best? Which political party? That's a tough question. They each have their strengths, and so let me give you an example. If you have, let's say, you're working on a government procurement project, and you receive in the mail a bid package. A lot of work has been done. It's been broken out. They know what they want, they know how they want it, and they know when they want it and to what quality spec. Traditional would be a great fit. Waterfall would be a great fit for that because a lot of it's known. You're dealing with knowns. Let's suppose, on the other hand, that senior management comes up with this vague idea of a software project that they want. They want a new general ledger, but they're not really sure what they want in it. This is a beautiful time for an Agile team to get together, put something up there that senior management can start working with maybe within 28 days. They get something and then collect feedback and rapidly loop that back in. Each of those has their own strengths, and those are two extreme examples, but each of those has their own advantages.
Right. I like that. Andy, you make me think of a product backlog too, and how when I started looking into Agile, that was one of the first things I gravitated to. I love the idea of a product backlog. We take requirements and we list them out, and then we put them in front of the product owner, and we say, hey, could you tell me what your priority is? Rank these. So then we're engaged. The team is literally in the room with the sponsor, with the ultimate owner of that product, and we're just listening. What's most important to you? If you have to prioritize or rank this list of requirements, put them in order for us.
And to me, Nick, that's the real advantage. Like if you had to narrow it down, what's Agile's biggest advantage? It would either be that they can react quickly to chaos and change. Like they thrive on chaos and change. They really like that. Or B, that they are so value focused. And so constantly the most valuable thing bubbles up to the top of the list in Agile, and the team can work on it and get it out there quickly.
But Andy, are there situations where you might say Agile just will not work in this instance?
Yeah. Okay, maybe. So let me and this is actually a controversial point in the Agile community. So some Agile practitioners say, look, Agile's not for every project. Some feel like that is blasphemy. Yeah. So I'm going to give you my own opinion on it. There's a couple of ideas where I would say it's a lot more challenging, a couple of concepts where it's more challenging for Agile to work and to thrive. One of those examples would be a really, really large team. Now, there's a principle within Agile that you should have a team that you can feed with a couple of pizzas. If it's bigger than that, Agile starts, friction gets introduced, right? Because this is a democratic process and the team members are empowered and they're making their own decisions. I think so you get a team of 40 people, 50 people, it can get chaotic with an Agile context. That doesn't mean it can't work, because there are guys out there who are putting this into practice and making it work. I think it's more challenging. I think another example would be, if you're going to build, let's go back to my general ledger. You're going to build a general ledger for a company, and you start working on that. Well, there's not a lot of material costs. The costs are in the people.
Yeah. You're not buying concrete. You're not buying cranes or renting equipment. You don't have a lot of upfront capital that you have to expend.
Right. But we're located in Atlanta. They're building the Braves Stadium right down the road from us right now. And that might not work so well from an Agile perspective if you were in the construction phase. Right. The design phase, maybe. And that would be an Agile practitioner's response is you do an Agile process for design, then you actually manage it more traditionally for the construction.
Right. It's a great example. So there you've got a multi-million-dollar project, a whole lot of assets in play, a lot of capital expenditure. So once you get into that construction phase or those aspects, that implementation, you need to have some pretty solid plans. There's not a lot of iterating going on then, but absolutely on the front end, the design, you can see that. So how's that for an answer, Nick? It depends.
Yeah, very often it does depend. Depends on who you're talking to. So let's talk to somebody else about this, too. Bringing in another voice to this conversation, Peter Saddington is a well-known Agile coach. He deals with teams and leaders and organizations who are implementing Agile sometimes for the very first time. We're honored that he took time out of his day. Peter, welcome to Manage This. Why don't you start by just giving us a little bit of your background in Agile?
Sounds good. Well, it's great to be part of the program. I appreciate you guys. My journey started back in '97 when I started as a developer with a large Fortune 50 company. And so I actually cut my teeth on the beginnings of Agile before it even really was. I entertained my first Agile project when I was a scientist at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in 2004. And ever since then have been a big proponent, consultant and coach and trainer of it, as it had a lot of powerful benefits to the project work that I was doing as a scientist. And so for me, intellectually, it made a lot of sense, and pragmatically, it actually worked. So ever since 2004, I've been doing Agile more properly, I suppose. And so currently, I'm an Agile coach and trainer with a company based out of Boulder, Colorado, called Agile for All.
Excellent. Peter, this is Bill Yates. It's great to reconnect, my friend. Thanks for joining us, too. One of the aspects that I think you can really speak to is the transformation that you're seeing taking place in organizations that are adapting or adopting Agile perhaps for the first time. And as you look at that, what are some of the cultural barriers that you see or the obstacles? And then what are some lessons learned that you're finding in your consulting engagements?
That's a great question, Bill. What we found as Agile has grown up since the manifesto was established in 2001, we've seen a lot of trainers and consultants and coaches look at more at the tactical level of teams, anything below the middle tier or the middle management level. I think that area has been well addressed, and certainly it's been well covered. And I think really the next level of agility for organizations is at scale. And so to your question around the challenges, I'll point out 5 that come off at the top of my head. It's interesting. I just finished an executive course with a group just last week, and these are the top 5 that came up. The first was no change in the organizational infrastructure, right? And so we need a lot of not only open hearts from everyone that's involved at scale, but we really need to look at opportunities to change the way the organization is not only number 1 organized, but number 2 structured. Number 2, there's often a lot of challenges with the view of the value stream. How's value created? All the way from the executives and leadership, even to the board, all the way down to the tactical players and engineers who are actually building the work. Number 3 would be a failure to decentralize control. I think we're moving to a more a cultural arena within the corporate world where control is no longer a viable option. No one likes being controlled, and so therefore we need to give engineers a lot more autonomy. I like to say freedom within a framework to work. Number 4, a lack of a transformational product owner is a big issue. And so, or a product manager, someone who has a vision of the product, has done copious amounts of surveying of their target and market demographic and understanding really what the users want. The last thing we want to do is spend lots of time and effort building something that our users don't like or that our users don't use. And last but not least, which is really the most important, a failure to transform leadership behaviors. It is no longer viable in the market for me specifically, to work with the executives and have them say, Peter, we want everyone trained. We want everyone to do things differently. Oh, by the way, we don't need to change. I think that is a serious lacking at the leadership level. They need to change too. Times are changing. We're working in a faster paced environment and market than ever before. And I think it's absolutely imperative that not only the leaders change, but part of that is part of the heart change, what I consider the heart change as well. The imminence of change is happening, and so we must embrace it and utilize it to our advantage. And so those are the top 5 major opportunities for failure at scale that I've witnessed easily within the last couple of years or so of doing consulting work.
Peter, those are really interesting. I see a common theme there of transformation. You need leaders to embrace it. You got to decentralize control. Those are, you think about well-established large organizations. That's difficult. Those are serious obstacles.
Absolutely.
So how do you, as a coach and a trainer, how do you from the top down or from the grassroots level up, what's some advice that you see, or what are some aspects that you've seen on teams where they've embraced this the right way or gone about it the right way?
Well, we approach enterprise transformation and agility at scale from a philosophical kind of vantage point. And it's not to sound too heady or too hoity-toity of sorts, but the philosophical really should be a priori, the praxis. And what I mean by that is often when we work with middle management to even moving up to the upper echelons of leadership, we find that everyone wants to know what to do. Well, for me as a consultant, I'll be honest, I don't really know what to do because I have no full understanding of the cultural landscape and the cultural nuances of that unique culture and company. And so the first thing we need to understand and establish with everyone is the why. And there's a great book. It's called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. It's a great book if you guys would love to read that. But at the end of the day, we have to have a good reason and a value proposition of why it's important to change. I work with many different clients, and as you can probably imagine, every client changes differently because the cultural context is different. What is not different from many of these companies is a value proposition as to why it's important to change. And so we start there. We start with why. Why is it important to think differently? Why is it important to address our customers' needs differently? Why is it important to embrace change differently? Why is it important to think differently, as Steve Jobs would say, right? And this is where we start. If we can help people understand the value of why it's important, then we can worry later about the praxis or the practical of how we apply change. And so that's where we really start, is changing the heart and the mind, and opening up the heart and the mind to the opportunity that change is imminent, and that within their current demographic and context, it's important to change. And when we get there, then the wheels have been greased, and it makes our job a lot easier as consultants to start moving the machinery around.
So, Peter, you've hit on one of the key tenets that I see when I look at projects or programs that bring about change, and that is, for those to be successful, research shows that you've got top-level support. You have that product owner, or you have that sponsor, you have that C-suite individual that is pretty loud and proud about the effort, the initiative.
For sure.
It really sells it. They have to own it. So that I can agree with some of those obstacles that you pointed out, that when those are lacking, then there's not going to be transformational leadership at the end. Those changes won't stick. So how do you, as that outsider, when you go in and you're talking with this C-suite individual and you're trying to convince her or him that, hey, you've got to be engaged and you've got to sell this along with me. It's not It's not up to me. How do you sell that? How do you pitch that to those who are going to embrace this change?
Well, there's a powerful saying. It goes like this. It says, I don't care what you know until I know that you care.
Right.
And my first job when I get on site with any client is to not only show them and unveil to them the opportunities that exist, but number two, to help them understand that I actually care about this change with them. And so I always like to, I coach a lot of other coaches and consultants and help them up their game. And I always tell them that it doesn't matter how much you know, your empathy, your ability to connect with people, dealing with their issues, their own personal, even personality issues of sorts, the way that they manage and work is so important. I would say it's even far more important than what we do. And so building a relational or what I call relational bridges or relational equity of sorts with people is my primary concern when I get on the ground. And as we grow in a relationship, they can see that I'm not only merely a consultant telling them, hey, there's opportunities here, but I'm also being a partner with them in helping them change. One thing that I always communicate to the leaders of any type of company is my job is to help mentor and guide them in changing the faith of their organization. And I think that's not only a poignant idea, but it's actually very real. We operate from various different worldviews, and the way that the leadership views the world has intrinsic and powerful ramifications of how they manage their workforce. And so from the top down, if we can change the faith of the organization, then everything else follows. If you track with me for just a quick second, if you convert from, let's say, an atheist to, let's say, a Christian, your worldview's changed, your faith has changed, and everything stems from that. The way you dress, the way you talk, the way you communicate, the way you deal with dissonance, the way you deal with conflict, the way you deal with people. It all changes based on that faith alone. And then in the secular worldview, they'd say it's just your worldview. Well, faith worldview doesn't matter. A lot of the opportunity that we have is to change the worldview and to change the faith of organizations so they can see the opportunity that exists, maybe even in front of their face, and they didn't even know it was there. And so being a partner in that is absolutely essential for helping them see the opportunities that exist and the rewards of doing things differently down the road.
Well, Peter, we care what you know, and we are so delighted that you care. Thank you so much for being with us. You're going to need to watch your mailbox here for the next few days because we have a very special gift for you. It's a Manage This coffee mug, and I'm looking at one right in front of me right now. It is beautiful. It is big. And so
yes.
I think you'll enjoy that. It's just a token of our appreciation for being with us. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter.
There's actually a certification for Agile, the PMI ACP. One of you is going to have to tell me what that acronym stands for. It seems to be gaining some traction, though. So, Bill, tell me, I know you have this credential. Andy, you have this credential as well.
I do.
All right. Why is this certification important? But Bill, first of all, tell me what it stands for.
Right. So PMI stands for Project Management Institute. You probably already got that one down.
Okay.
And then ACP, Agile Certified Practitioner.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So PMI-ACP. PMI introduced this certification a few years back. Andy and I both have it. Some others here in the office have it as well. And it solidifies some of the thought that's out there regarding Agile and Agile practices. And it's a way for practitioners to show that, okay, I have the experience level to be able to apply for and go after this certification. And I have a foundation of not just experience, but knowledge related to Agile practices. Therefore, I can sit for this exam. And to that end, we've created some exam preparation content. Andy started out with a book. Andy, there was a recent update to the book. Why was that?
Right, so the book is the PMI ACP exam, How to Pass on Your First Try. And as PMI does, they updated the exam spec. They do that from time to time. And when that changed, we always want to make sure that we are in lockstep with them. And so this was really going through with a fine-tooth comb, making sure we're still majoring on the majors, minoring on the minors, and having all the terms and definitions in the glossary and practice exams, that type of thing done. So it was a meaningful update, and now we're in what we're calling iteration 2, which is the second edition of that book.
Nice. I smiled when I saw the book and saw that stamped on the front of it. I was like, very clever. Well done, sir. One of the things I'll point out, too, Andy, one of the differences that we see with the PMI ACP versus some others, this is a certification offered by PMI, but there's not a BOC, right? There's not a project management body of knowledge. There's not a PMBOK guide for the PMI ACP as there is for the PMP. There's also, for program managers, there's a standard, but for PMI ACP, there's not. So I guess I got to buy your book.
I guess you do, Bill. And I wouldn't be surprised to see an Agile BOC, an Agile Body of Knowledge, get published at some point. It's tricky. Agile's still in a very formative stage. There's so much activity and so much evolution going on within the Agile practices. So you've got Scrum and Lean and so many of the ones represented on the exam that it's hard to even know how to cull that body down. Now, they've done it for the test, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a body of knowledge come out. I think there's just a little bit of work that has to be done there first.
I agree. One of the things that's interesting, too, when you go to PMI and you ask or look on their website, and what should I read? What's going to be on the exam? How do I prepare for it? There are, 10 or a dozen or more books that are listed. And recently we had a colleague go through the exam. They used your book as their primary means of preparation, and they passed. And one of the things I think that really points out is, and I'm not just trying to pat you on the back, even though you do have a cold.
Yeah, I'll take it.
One of the beauties of the book is it takes all these different ideas and concepts from the Agile practice and brings them together. So
some of those, Bill, will conflict too.
Sure.
Occasionally there's different philosophies of how long an iteration should last and the vocabulary around what you call an iteration.
Right.
And so we try and synthesize that and make some sense out of it.
Yep.
Andy, let me ask you this. A project manager listening, wondering, at what point do I need this certification? What would be a clue?
Yeah, it's a good source of authority. PMI, the Project Management Institute, largest group of project managers in the world, and their certifications and credentials tend to mean something. So this is helpful if let's say that you are either an Agile coach, you're coaching a team. Let's say that you're working on an Agile project and you really want to differentiate yourself. You want to set yourself apart from your coworkers. It's a great way. I think past that, needing it's a funny word. I don't know how many of these certifications or degrees we need to do the jobs we do all the time, but it's something. So I'm a certification junkie, and that's a crazy question for me. That's almost nonsensical.
So how many acronyms do you have behind your name?
I have a bunch behind my name right now. I've got a few, and that list may not be done yet.
Well, we always talk about, the importance of new ideas and perspectives, gaining new knowledge. So What about reading? What are you reading these days, Andy?
Oh, that's funny. You know what? I'm doing less reading right now, and I'm doing more writing these days. I've got an update to my PMP book coming out, and I've been taking some time every day and outlining a concept for a new book that I'll be ready to talk about soon, and we'll let our podcast listeners know before anybody else about that. But I'm reading a book by Bill Bryson, and Bill Bryson's one of my favorite authors in the world, and it's called The Road to Little Dribbling. And he is just an amazing author. He's written a lot of nonfiction. I guess it's mostly nonfiction. If you read his books, you have to kind of draw the line. But I've really been enjoying that. And he's one of 2 or 3 authors in the world that makes me laugh out loud. And so I'll be sitting in a restaurant and just guffawing as I'm reading his stuff, and people start looking at me. It has an unusual effect on me.
You start to do a little bit of dribbling yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Andy Crowe, Bill Yates, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us once again. And a special thanks to Peter Saddington for adding his insight as well. That's it for us here on Manage This. We hope you'll tune back in on March 1st for our next podcast, when we'll be joined by a colleague. Mike is a senior program manager overseeing projects for the CDC, dealing with topics such as SharePoint upgrade and big data. You can visit us at velociteach.com. Click on Manage This Podcast and tweet us at manage_this. That's manage_this. If you have any questions about project management certification, whether it's the PMP, the CAPM, PMI ACP, CSM, PGMP, or PFMP. Or maybe you'd like to be a guest on the show. We'd love to hear your stories. That's all for this episode. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep calm and manage this.